Hello, this is Pick, and welcome back to my guide for FTB Sky's Expert Mode. Somewhere out there is a castle in the sky. I'm gonna go find it. In order to do that though, I can make the search much easier by getting an Eye of Sky legend. It's very similar to the Eye of Legend that found the villages. To get one, I'm going to need to max out the traits on a cartographer. This requires Enderium coins, so you'll at least have to have been to Mars to get one. You could go out and search for the castle manually, but why would I do that? It behaves in basically the same way as the regular Eye of Legend. It will point you in the direction of the nearest castle. Of course, you'll need some way of flying to get there, unless you really want to bridge out with millions of cobblestone. Well, maybe not millions, but at least like 5,000. Probably closer to 10,000. I can just use my glide spell to get me there. Now that I'm basically right next to it, I found a village and I'm gonna set up a teleporter here in case I ever want to come back. I don't know how many things would be useful to come back for, but you know. Also, I'd recommend you have a way of storing a large amount of loot. For me, of course, that's my wireless terminal, as I can just shove everything I pick up into storage. In any case, here's what the castle looks like. It's on a big circular platform, and there are some restrictions in place. While you're on the grounds of the castle, before you clear it, you can't break any blocks. The Staff of Travel's blink feature will not work, and you can't place blocks either, but you can manipulate things in the environment, such as levers. Keep looking around, and eventually you'll find some doors. These will take you inside the castle, or inside the dungeon. To open doors, you need keys. Right-click on a door with the corresponding colored key to open it. The key is consumed upon use. You'll need to find more of them in loot chests to keep progressing throughout the dungeon. While most of the loot in here is just okay, this is the only way to get shulker shells right now, so... well, not the only way, but probably the easiest way. Just make sure you look around for keys and such. There are way more than enough. I believe red keys are the ones that are quote-unquote progress. No, red keys do not open a hidden door in the wall that could potentially lead to a hidden treasure room that contains a red item, for all 2 of you that get that joke. I am greatly over-equipped for this. Nothing in here really poses a threat with my insane HP, decent armor, and a strong sword. And I also have a Flux-infused bow that I made, and my spellbook. And if I really ever felt in danger, I could just teleport home. So yeah, this isn't that difficult, nor is it really that interesting, honestly. There are a few small puzzles littered about. Find a way to press the button, pull the levers in the right order. You'll also come across a main shaft that connects all of the floors. Of course, you can only open them from the underside, as it expects you to progress to the next floor in order to go back to the previous. If you have the most basic understanding of vanilla mechanics, you'll be fine. So much so that I don't really need to show much more at the castle, honestly. Do it, get your stack or so of shulker shells, and then you can leave. Oh, also at the bottom I guess there's a lever that turns off all the restrictions so you can dig out. Now that we have all that silly exploration out of the way, by the way, that was to make some melodic integral components. What's actually on today's agenda? Well, we need to actually craft that melodic alloy, and to do that we're going to need heat. Not heat like Pneumaticraft heat though. Specifically Mekanism's type of heat. You can use Mekanism heat to heat Pneumaticraft things, but not the other way around. To generate this heat, we're going to need radioactive materials. They'll be going in the RTG, or Radioisotope Thermoelectric Generator. For some reason it says RTG generator, which is like saying Radioisotope Thermoelectric Generator. Semantics aside, of course, there are materials we need to craft, and most of them aren't too bad. A bit of liquid concrete, some lead. I'll need some of that lovely TNT, but now that I'm able to make Mega TNT, it isn't awful. Oh wait, did I not make any Mega TNT on camera yet? Must have mixed up when in the video I did things. Well, in any case, you just have to put Nitro TNT into the blast chiller with some of that stabilized pyrotheum, and that makes Mega TNT. It gives you the most bang for your buck, the Mao, when processing plates, and, you know, everything else, and it's the only thing that can process calorite. One day I'll take care of the implosion compressor and actually automate it, but for now I'm just going up manually and processing stacks upon stacks at a time. What I need now are 3 machines dedicated to Mekanism's top tier ore processing. Generally speaking though, we're only going to be using it primarily for lead. I'm getting plenty of yield just by sifting really quickly, so I'm going to use this lead to make lead crystals. You'll need a dissolution chamber, washer, and crystallizer. I wouldn't quite set up permanent, dedicated crystal production yet, but it'll be good to have this down at least for now. These machines do get rather expensive though. Enigmatic processors are insane, and they're not even the highest tier circuit. I'm also getting kind of lazy with where I put machines. All of this stuff is just going underneath the pagoda. Yeah, I'm not exactly the neatest at this point. Thankfully, all three of these things just fit nicely next to each other. Just keep track of your channels. Once all of that stuff is crafted and you have some lead crystals, simply process it into your radium crystals, and then you can craft that into an RTG generator. As I said, this thing makes heat. However, it also makes radiation. So, how do we deal with radiation, you ask? Before the RTG can even make any heat in the first place, I'm going to need yellow cake uranium. To get that, I need uranium ingots, which means I need to process uranium crystals. There's a whole processing line for this. It does work with most raw ores, but really, is that worth it? The married crusher does that way better if you really want increased ore yield. More importantly though, there's this whole line of machines that we need just to process uranium. They also have some extra requirements. We'll need hydrochloric acid, which is gotten by combining hydrogen and chlorine. Hydrogen we have plenty of via electrolytic separator, and chlorine we're making via brine. I'm just going to start it off with a batch, but I will have dedicated brine production for chlorine at a later point. The purification chamber also requires oxygen, which again, we have in our system thanks to electrolytic separator. And then the rest of the steps don't need any other inputs besides power and then the item being sent through to process. Make sure they're all set up to input on one side and output on the other, and they auto export, you get the point. And then finally send those last uranium ingots through the enrichment chamber to get yellow cake uranium. Whose ranium? Also, to make the crusher, I need a compressed iron drill pit, which requires lubricant, which requires biodiesel, and redstone, which we already have. Everything in this process is a rabbit hole of some sort. That's the vibe of today. There, now all that uranium is finally ready. You don't have to make too much to start, but you are going to want to automate this at some point, so sooner or later you'll have to get around to it. Now, radiation is just a little bit dangerous. It can completely poison a chunk if you're not careful, so the safest place to do it is inside a compact machine. From here, the radiation can't escape. You'll also probably want a radiation-proof suit. Radiation will go away over time, but it does take quite a while. If you want, you can make a dosimeter or a Geiger counter, and that'll tell you how much radiation is on your player and in the chunk at a given time, respectively. If you suffer too much radiation poisoning, you're gonna have a very bad time. So make sure you're wearing your radiation-proof suit when working with these radioactive materials, at least for the time being. By the end of the episode, we'll have a way of managing this radiation, and actually use it for something useful. The RTG generates electricity alongside heat. Both can be extracted using the extract mode on the respective types of conduit. Thermodynamic conductors for heat, regular cables for power. The RTG will stop functioning if it can't dump its power somewhere. Because the amount it generates is so unbelievably low though, you're probably best off just voiding any excess. You could still make use of what it's generating if you'd like. I just wouldn't worry too much about getting power from it because I'm literally making 212,000 RF per tick already. A drop in the bucket doesn't begin to describe 80 RF per tick by comparison. Heat also dissipates over time, so you're going to want to make sure that you're using the heat while it's around. And Mekanism doesn't have the fancy installation mechanics that Pneumaticraft does. Essentially, you want to make sure that if you're generating heat, you're using it. At least for right now, before we automate things. I went ahead and crafted those melodic integral components. You do need the supercooler and slow melter to craft these dark fireballs. But other than that, it isn't too difficult, I guess. Well, it takes a while though. To be honest, you're probably best off making a second arc furnace. I'm lazy and didn't do that. I might at some point though. It would greatly help to split up the alloys versus the Desh and the Ostrom and stuff. In any case, this has a scale factor of 8.5. Compare this to the resonant one, which only has a 4x scaling. Some recipes just use so much power, notably the fluid encapsulator. So, who's ready to make a calorite rocket? We only just went to Venus and now we're going to Glacio. To make this run, I did need 256k worth of crafting memory, but that's okay, I need to make one of those for the rocket regardless. So having one on hand was important anyway. I also slapped down some co-processors. These effectively allow it to parallelize recipes. Normally I'll get caught up on certain requests, but the co-processor allows it to use multiple machines at a given time with its requesting. That being said, while it is automated, that doesn't mean it's going to happen in a quick time frame. Not to mention that my power generation isn't exactly sufficient for the job, but I won't be upgrading my power generation just yet. So, what am I to do when my energy storage just isn't sufficient? Well, we're gonna upgrade it again, of course. It's time to make an induction matrix. For this, I'm going to require lithium dust. You can make this by simply using the rotary condensator with your liquid lithium to get lithium gas, and then crystallizing it into lithium dust. This is a core crafting component when making induction matrices and their components. They're a modular multi-block too. But for now, I'm just going to use some of the most basic components because they're relatively cheap. Believe me, we will be making the more expensive components later. I think I'll let it run until it fills up a drawer with lithium dust. I'm going to consider that enough for a long time. Hopefully the whole pack. To build it, you're going to want to build a giant box. I believe its dimensions are 3x4x3 up to 18x18x18, and you can have it filled with air on spots where you don't have enough components. I just prefer having it fully filled. It looks weird if you don't, even though you can't see the inside when it's formed, but you know, it's one of those things if you know it bothers you. Alongside the outer shell, you're going to want some ports. These, of course, determine where you can input and output energy. I believe those count as item transfer slots as well, and the thing is a giant energy cube in that it can charge things. But primarily, I'm using it for giant flux storage. Now, with this, I can make over 12 billion stored, as opposed to the 2 billion I have in energy cubes underneath me. I'm going to need liquid elemental void for producing the calorite space platings, so I'll just take some out right now. However, it is a little annoying to get to the side of the block face with that pipe. You know, the one against the wall. If only I was smaller. Oh, hey, there's a personal shrinking device, not to be confused with the one from Compact Machines. It'll let me shrink down to the size of a fifth of a block. Walls can't stop me now. After watching the wonderful loop of space platings be crafted for the how many ever times this has been, I guess rocket-wise that's the 4th time, we can finally get to crafting those rocket components. Again, remember, you're going to need a 256k crafting storage to make the final tier engine. And if you want the jet suit, it's going to be about as expensive as the rocket, unfortunately. But in any case, it's time to finish things up and head off to Glacio. Woo, planets. You get the drill by this point. You make the rocket, you fill it with the fuel, and you go up, you go down, get to the planet, set up a mining operation, etc. That being said, mining isn't imperative here. Would you believe me if I told you that right now we are here to get some fancy looking rocks? I don't even mean ore. Glacio doesn't even have a high chance of generating ice shard ore, which is what I thought the point of it was going to be. There will be a boss here at some point, but I guess I'll have to cover that in a separate video when it's finally implemented. For now, I just want some of that surface rock. So yeah, you don't really need to set up your quarry here, I guess. Obviously, you will want to make the teleporter though. Teleporters have become fairly cheap at this point with how much you should have been automating. And yeah, chunk load it, blah blah blah, everything we've done before. If you've paid attention, you'll know that we've already been getting a lot of ice shard ore anyway. We've gotten it from both the moon and Mars. And the best way to mine this is with my Fortune 10 pickaxe. As a recap, you can start with Fortune 3, use Ancient Tomes to boost it up to Fortune 9, and then infuse it with water to get Fortune 10. This will provide us with several thousand ice shards, all usable for making cryo fuel in the Cryo Freezer. The Cryo Freezer is a machine that we were basically going to Glacio to be able to make. It requires the Glacio stone. I'm going to make a bit of dedicated Flux network storage. While it ultimately probably doesn't matter too much, it does help a little bit. Essentially, you just connect them to your Flux storage network so that there's extra power there. Good for if you have a disparity in your number of Flux plugs versus Flux points, I guess. I'm constantly running out of elemental water for crafting, so I think it's about time we sped up source refining. First things first, I'm going to need more source. This will also take some of the burden off of the flight rituals. I'm just going to use the fluid Sourcelink. I have all of this spare force-infused biodiesel lying around that I'm not using, so I can repurpose it here and make source out of it. Send that right into a source jar, into the source condenser, and there you go. Making a specialized system for water production doesn't sound like a bad idea though. While I'm here, I should speed up mana production as well. It's not going to be a lot more, but if I make some endoflames and put them on some enchanted soil, I can produce mana at a little quicker rate. Enchanted soil doubles the speed of the flower that sits on it, so in this case the endoflames are going to be like having 8 endoflames. I can then hook up an open crate and automatically export coal into it, and I'll be passively producing just a little more mana than I was before with just the Rosa Arcana. I need it because I'm sending so much Ostrom through there to get that pixie dust, as well as processing for mana-infused copper. The easiest way to have an auto shutoff for the coal is to use a pressure plate. However, you want to make sure it's not touching your mana spreader or it will turn it off. I'm also using Immersive Engineering's redstone wiring. It's so useful to have this stuff. It's like wired wireless redstone, I guess. You can have up to 16 colors on a network, and you can determine whether the signal goes in or out. All 16 colors can travel along the same wires too. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to make a whole bunch more Ostrom space plating blocks, as the Cryo Freezer requires an Ostrom tank. That's 1 per Cryo Freezer if you want to make more of them. But, you know, just put them through, let it happen, and eventually you'll have enough Ostrom plating to make your stupid Cryo Freezer. The thing is super slow too. The process of making cryo fuel isn't that complicated, at least. You just have to insert ice shards into it, though it only accepts it via hopper. Specifically a hopper, you can't use entangled blocks. A very picky machine. So I'm just exporting all of my ice shards into here, and then exporting it with a pipe. You're definitely going to want to put some time torches on this thing though. So why are we on my creative testing world? Because making Nitro Diesel is just not worth it. For the sake of completeness of the guide, I'm going to show you how to make it anyway. But I did the math, and well, this is the bare minimum setup for producing enough Nitro Diesel to run 1 turbo diesel generator. That includes all of the cryo freezers and all of the time torches, by the way. You can barely make a profit out of this setup. Now, anything I'm supplying via creative stuff is stuff I've either already automated or have a lot of supply of, you know. If you want infinite ice shards, I will show you a way to do that in a little bit. But otherwise, we have our generic refinery set up. It's refining flux-infused oil. Obviously, I have plenty of flux gems. I guess the one benefit to this is that it seems to profit on flux diesel, so theoretically you could tear down your force diesel setup if you wanted, but again, I just don't care enough to do that. You have to make 8 cryo freezers. 8! I know it's unprofessional to complain about this kind of stuff in a guide video, but please, spare yourself the effort. If you want it for the novelty, go right ahead, of course. I'm just saying for the average player, unfortunately as it is, I don't recommend it. If something changes and it gets buffed, I will let you know in the comments. But yeah, I have an infinite supply of all of these inputs, other than the ice shards, which again I'll cover later. Since you wanted to increase your stress unit capacity, of course you're going to want to know how much better it is, right? Well, it's twice as good. That would be an alright number if it wasn't such a pain in the butt to get all the cryo fuel you need. You'll need to automate cryotheum at some point anyway, but again, it's only so worthwhile. So yeah, I'll go and meet you back on my main world now, I guess. So yeah, producing those ice shards. The ore laser can mine them up with the light blue lens from orbit. Might want to give him some time torches though. That being said, time torches don't work in orbit, not unless you oxygenate the area. Apparently they're considered torches still, who knew? The oxygen distributor just requires water and power, and then it'll make a very large radius full of oxygen. It'll probably fill up most of the space station, and if you put it in the center, I think it might fill the whole thing. But I don't really care about most of it. I barely used it for anything after all. The side bonus in this case is that I guess I don't have to wear my spacesuit in orbit anymore. It's probably about time to set up that Venus Blaze Powder melting automation with a mixture of requesters and automatic output. I can make sure we always have enough stabilized pyrotheum to both craft more Mega TNT when we need it, and use the pyrotheum itself for different crafts. In this case I'm working towards purple circuits, which is the final circuit tier. I've also gone ahead and automated the air mill grindstone for that Venus Blaze Dust from Blaze Rods. It's not too complex, I just use the logistical sorter as a filtered output. Gotta love the logistical sorter, right? The next thing on the list is cryo-infused gas. This is going to require a supply of crude water gems. Of course it's water gems, why wouldn't it be? Well, anyway, this is simple to automate. You can't batch automate it, unfortunately, due to the chance output, but that's okay. I'll simply have it automatically stop crafting when it has enough crude water gems stored inside the system. An ordered sorter is a good way of inserting the items into it. This ensures that it happens in an orderly manner, and then I import the remaining gems that come out, regardless of what tier they are. I guess this will produce fine and flawless water gems as a byproduct if I ever need those. And of course this applies to all 4 elements, not just water, but water's the only one I need a large supply of crude gems for. I figure it's probably easiest to just hook up a storage bus here. A word of warning when you're using storage buses on chemical tanks, and I guess by extension Mekanism's fluid tanks as well. Because they have item slots in their inventory as well as their fluid and or gas, it will try to put items in there, namely gas tanks. For the longest time my gas tanks were disappearing and I had no idea where they were going. Yeah, they were getting sent into these chemical tanks that I had storage buses on. All you need to do is go into the settings and set the item for the side that the storage bus is on as nothing. That way it won't read or send items there. In any case, now it's going to auto-craft cryo-infused gas for us. I tried making it in the requester, but it always seemed to bug out every time I had it enabled, so I gave up on it. Having a large enough stash is good enough anyway. Who's ready to make a couple of ultimate circuits? Remember those enigmatic processors? Yeah, you need 4 of those to make 1 ultimate circuit. And 8 Enderium plates per enigmatic circuit to make 32 Enderium plates per ultimate circuit. Let me tell you, these high-end recipes are something else. It's a good thing I've automated so much of this junk. You use so much of this stupid water. I decided to just upgrade the number of evaporators I have. Unfortunately, the rotary condensator will not work because I don't need to evaporate water itself. But yeah, I have 4 of them right now, and I end up upgrading to 7. Just to keep up with water demand. You need it for crude gems, you need it for springland, you need it for drenched iron, you need it for water crystals. And that's not even counting the liquid stuff that I need a stock of. But I guess the evaporator doesn't really matter for that. I will never financially recover from this decision. 8 more ultimate control circuits, let's go! You can see the insane resource costs for this thing. And as soon as you turn it on, it eats up all the things that the requesters are requesting. So all the crafting CPUs start requesting miscellaneous junk. And while I do this, I realize I have so many slow steps that I have to manage, so I address a few of those along the way. I already addressed the water, of course. You want to talk about a slow step with this stuff, look no further than the stupid fluid encapsulator. You need so many volatile processors, so many advanced circuits. So many that even when I put in all of these upgrades, it can't actually power itself. What I ended up having to do was use an entangled block just to have a second power connection on it. But of course even that's not fast enough, so you know what I did? I made a second one! Only running Prismalium. I'm out of melodic ingots right now. Thankfully that's a perk of these block size pattern providers. They actually work with as many machines as they need to. I should actually try that sometime, just this giant stack of machines. Would be kinda cool, I think. I'll have to make that into the design of the base next time. This one was designed for the single wall of machines. But it would look basically like what I do for those pattern provider molecular assembler stacks. Anyway, make more fluid encapsulators, you're gonna need the processing speed. At this point, I'm requesting so much Electrum that I might as well make the machines that are making it faster. That and the pulverized copper and Electrum, including the storage devices used to hold all of it. I think it's kind of impressive how I've held off on upgrading any of these multi-servo presses for this long. Well, other than the copper and gold plates, but that's strictly so that the wires can keep up. Another thing I'd recommend doing is making some gas upgrades. Certain machines have a bonus gas used in crafting. You know, the chemical injection chamber, dissolution chamber, and the purification chamber. What gas upgrades do is it makes them use less oxygen, hydrochloric acid, and sulfuric acid, respectively, for the purification, chemical injection, and dissolution chambers. This means that you have much less of a demand for those chemicals, especially their constituents, you know, like chlorine. With applied mechanistics it isn't that bad, because you can consolidate all of those gases onto one network. But the less you're using the better, and you're going to be looping uranium anyway, so you're going to be using a lot of it. Time to set up a requester for Elemental Void. You know, that recipe that requires pixie dust. You might as well dedicate a fabrication matrix to this. Not only that, but after I finished recording for this episode, I upgraded my mana generation again. I just put down another Kekamuris, nothing you haven't seen before. But anyway, I'm simply exporting it into an ender tank. This is going to allow me to teleport it into the compact machine. I'm trying to avoid using my main applied energistics network inside compact machines. That requires a whole quantum ring setup, and that just sounds like too much hassle for me. Instead, ender chests and ender tanks will do the job. Alright, so I built the Microfusion Extrapolator multi-block. This is basically radiation management, as well as uranium farming. I haven't done the math yet for figuring out if the better ways of making radioactivity are good, in like a per uranium sense. I'll get back to you on that next episode. For now, I just made a few more RTGs. Even just one will do it, but it'll be kinda slow. As before, an entangle block makes it much easier to automate this thing. Make sure it's receiving enough heat, make sure that enough radioactivity is being generated in the area, which, by the way, when it says how much radioactivity it's using, it consumes that number of sieverts per operation tick. That's the unit of radioactivity. Don't worry, it doesn't need to be producing that much, but it will limit your processing speed, obviously. Filtered item transporters make quick work of automating it, though. You'll want to make sure that you're importing lead crystals and exporting uranium crystals, and then re-importing uranium yellowcake. Alright, this is what I ended up with in final. Currently have 3 RTGs going, making more than enough radiation for the MFE to do its job. I also have a chest at the end to collect more yellowcake. The point of that is I'm going to require it when I end up making fissile fuel for a fission reactor, but I'll be getting into that next episode. So for now, that's enough for today. Thanks for watching, this has been Pick, I'm glad to have seen you, and I hope to see you again.